Welcome back, AP. All right, so we are now getting into the end of World War I. Of course, you already know, and I hope this is not a spoiler, the ended up being the Allied victory of World War I, and we're getting into the biggest reasons why World War I was won in such a decisive manner between the time period of about late 1916 to the end of 1918. So jumping straight into it, you have to understand that the Allies by this point are increasing in efficiency. The Allies are having some major victories, including different areas like the battles of Ypres, including places like the Battle of Verdun, including areas where they shouldn't have won, and like places like Passchendaele. And the Somme is considered an Allied victory to some historians. However, the dramatic costs were insanely high. The thing going into it, though, is speaking of this efficiency, there's an entire theater of this war that we haven't even discussed yet, and it's the Middle Eastern theater. Because if you look at a map of World War I, most of the fighting and most of the historiography is usually centered in the continent of Europe between the Western and the Eastern fronts. Now, this is a very, very, very good way of looking at things because it's where the bulk of the actual fighting did occur. But the thing about it is that there's an entire theater in the Middle East mainly going against the Ottoman Empire, okay? So the Ottoman Empire and the methods of fighting them are going to dramatically change post-1915 after the failure of the Allies at this thing called the Gallipoli Campaign. Since there was a massive failure of the Allies at the Gallipoli Campaign, they decided to take a different route. Instead of trying to take the Dardanelles from the Ottomans, they decided instead to try and destroy them from within. Now, the interesting part also to understand about this is the bulk of the fighting that's going on is actually between Russia and the Ottomans over a land war, and there's a very important thing to understand is that a terrible event in history from 1915 to 1917 is going to occur in this area that exists between Russia and Turkey. Now, this is a modern-day map of this area, so the Russian Empire would have extended into this area as well, but the area that was going to be fought over, or kind of griped over, or that is going to come under certain scrutiny when it comes to the Ottoman Empire is the area known as Armenia, okay? So Armenians, or cultural Armenian people, are from this area that borders places like modern-day Georgia and Azerbaijan, also Turkey and Iran. Now, Armenia and Armenian troops had been citizens of the Ottoman Empire for some time and are culturally mixed between, I believe, and like if anybody knows the answer to this, that is completely fine. And but I believe they're predominantly Christian people within this area, as opposed to the Muslim majority of the Ottoman Empire. Now, the Armenians were going to be accused by the Ottomans of directly betraying Ottoman rule and the Ottoman Empire by several Ottoman generals when the Ottomans lost multiple major battles to Russia within the borders of what is known as Armenia. And since the Ottomans accused them of this, this then began a massive campaign of genocide and deportation. Now, this is yet again another time this has occurred. The last time was in Bulgaria. The methods used by the Ottoman Empire to persecute Bulgarians led to the Russian interest into the Russo-Turkish War in 1877. So this is not the first time that violence from the Ottoman Empire had occurred. Now, the big thing, though, that ends up happening is a deportation of Armenians from their homeland and also a mass genocide. So this right here is actually a very famous picture of the post-Armenian genocide of a man standing in a field in Armenia over the bones of the deceased, okay? And over 1 million people are going to die in this Armenian genocide. This group of people right here are waiting out front of a train station, which is being expected to deport them out of Armenia, and then these people would all then be gathered up and then would actually be executed immediately following the taking of this photo. And then this right here is actually when some Armenians were deported on foot. This is a common sight that would be seen on the edges of roadways during the Armenian genocide, because as the Armenians were deported on foot, they would then be rounded up and shot by Ottoman soldiers. Now, the other crazy thing that happened is even our Ottoman generals tried to purge out Armenians from their military, disarmed them, and then also executed them as well. And this is not unlike the things that happened in Russia as well, because Russian officers were actually conducting pogroms against Jewish soldiers before the revolution began in 1917. But the Armenian genocide serves as a terrifying example of what's occurring in the Middle Eastern theater. This right here is a Russian soldier standing above two Russian soldiers standing above a mass grave in a destroyed city in Armenia, which is replete and full of bodies that have been burned, okay? So the thing that actually is going to end up happening is that, and this actually is the gravesite of the Turkish hero that actually created the Armenian Genocide, Talat Pasha, which is actually really screwed up considering the fact that he should not be held up as a national hero. Now look, but the big thing that this is going to inspire is this Armenian Genocide, the Armenian Genocide and movements like it perpetrated by the Ottomans upon the other Arab communities under their empire are going to inspire Arabic revolts, right? So the Arabs are going to revolt against their Ottoman holders or the Ottoman Empire rulers, especially the young Turkish government, and they are going to be inspired by figures in the Allied Corps, much like Lawrence of Arabia, right? This is Sir Lawrence of Arabia, who is actually a British officer who went to inspire these Arab revolts to try and kill the Ottoman Empire from within instead of directly attacking their army like they did the Gallipoli campaign. So Lawrence of Arabia actually inspired these revolts and helped lead them, and actually is going to weaken the Ottoman Empire so the Allies can turn their focus and immediately begin attacking Germany again on the Western Front. Now, meanwhile, though, back on the Western Front, where the Allies are becoming more efficient, you have to understand that the fighting is still massively chaotic. You also need to understand that morale is very low for the Allies and for the Central Powers. This photo right here is actually taken at the Battle of Passchendaele, where apparently the mud was so thick that they had almost an impossibility of going across no man's land, moving things through this entire battlefield. And the soldiers that actually lived through this described the muck of Passchendaele to be absolutely death-taking and like life-stripping of their entire units and their entire their companies. Now, the big thing that's going to happen though is Germany is going to begin to resume unrestricted submarine warfare as of February 1st, 1917. Now, why would they do this? Why would they choose February 1st, 1917 to resume submarine warfare after the sinking of the Lusitania angered the Americans and the threat of the American invasion inside this war was becoming all too real? Why would you choose to do this now? Why would you reignite unrestricted submarine warfare after 2 years of not doing it? Well, for a lot of reasons, right? This is trying to curry the ability for the Germans to try and gain an advantage, and they're doing this because Lenin is now successfully been smuggled back into Russia. So they believe that the Eastern Front is going to dissolve if Russia actually implodes into revolution, which they were correct. Food riots and low morale in Germany are breaking out all over the place. There are areas being raided. There are butcher shops like this one in Germany and Berlin that are being destroyed. This is actually where you can see feine Fleisch, which means fine meat, and this is the butcher's name. And you can see that this is a butcher shop in Berlin, that the glass has been completely broken out and all of their things have been taken because the supplies inside of Germany are so low. And they're so low because of the North Sea mine blockades that are preventing the North Sea mine blockade, and also the direct blockade of the German coast is preventing the supplies coming into Germany, leading to hunger riots and bread riots inside of Germany itself. So as you can see, the morale is very low. But something important to remember is that morale is low across all these countries. This war is still dragging on. It's claimed over 1 million lives already, actually several million lives already. The draft is running out of soldiers as well. So, and why do I have age question mark? Because Germany by this point was drafting soldiers as young as 15, okay? And also, the reason why they are re-beginning submarine warfare is because they have the expectation that they are going to issue a final push on the offensive of a German military offensive, a massive push in 1918 to try and knock the Allies out as fast as possible, because the Americans are on their way. Now, the reason why the Americans are on their way is because of a thing known as the Thezimmerman telegram, okay? Now, the Thezimmerman telegram is going to be the biggest reason why they are going to resume submarine warfare, because they are aware that the Americans have intelligence that has came from Germany as of the 1st of January, 1917, that they plan on doing something very dastardly and very underhanded, right? So that what ends up happening is that the Thezimmerman Note, or telegram, you can actually, on the AP test, you may see it written as either, as a massive controversy behind it. Now, some Americans believed it was a forgery. Some British people believed it was a forgery. There are a lot of people that believe that this note was so aggressive and so over the top that there's a chance that it actually might not have been real, and it might have been something fabricated by the British to get the Americans to become more involved and actually immediately go. However, other historians disagree with this note or not the note, but disagree with that controversy due to the fact that a lot of people believed at this time that American involvement was inevitable due to the fact that the economic standards of American companies would go down if the English and the French were to lose this war, okay? So a lot of people believed that the things said in this Zimmerman Note were very, very true. Some thought it was not necessarily true. However, we need to get down to what it said. The things written in this note as of January 1st, 1917 are going to lead to the restart of unrestricted submarine warfare in February 1st, 1917 and the German offensive that is coming in the spring, okay? Now, what it actually said, it was a note written by a man named Arthur Zimmerman, okay? Arthur Zimmerman is the German ambassador, the main German ambassador, the lead German ambassador, and he actually sends this telegram to the German minister to Mexico on January 1st, 1917. And he tells that minister that if the Americans invade, or if the Americans decide to become involved in World War I, that he is to go and try to convince Mexico to invade the U.S. to try and slow them down and tell them to reclaim the land that Mexico lost in the Mexican-American War and the Texas Revolution, right? So this message was intercepted and decoded by the British on January 17th, 1917, and actually was on its way to being intercepted by the Americans anyway, because the British had been tapping telegraph lines for several years. Now, it was decoded and given to the United States on February 1st, 1917. Why? Look at that date. The day that Germany resumes unrestricted submarine warfare is the day that Woodrow Wilson reads this Zimmerman Note saying that the Germans want the Mexican military to invade the United States if they get involved in World War I. This will then be published in American newspapers in March of 1917, and the U.S. will declare war in April of 1917, right? Now, this is really important because actually Woodrow Wilson waffled over this for quite some time. He couldn't decide if he wanted to enter into this war, but as of April, 1917, on April 1st, 1917, the United States will declare war on Germany due to the Zimmerman Note and the things that are said. And here come the Doughboys, right? Doughboys is a nickname given to American soldiers by European soldiers, right? They referred to them as doughboys, and ironically enough, we have no idea, well, not no idea, there are a lot of theories as to where this nickname came from, but no one is perfectly sure. Some believe that it actually came from Americans discussing, talking about from Americans during the Mexican-American War. There are some other ones that actually occurred, some theories that said that when the uniforms of Americans became caked in clay, they looked like big lumps of dough. There's also ones about their buttons and things like that. But the Doughboys are American forces. So as of April 1st, the U.S. forces are beginning to mobilize, right? And the U.S. forces will be entering Europe as fast as possible. Now, this right here, this is a unit of American soldiers, of course, sitting with their version of the Maxim machine gun, carrying their arms as well. But something that's very important to me that I really like to bring up every time I talk about this is a very special unit that actually entered into this war along the American side, right? And this unit was known as the Harlem Hellfighters, right? The Harlem Hellfighters were a unit of American soldiers that entered into World War I, and they are completely African-American soldiers. This all-black unit of the American military is considered one of the most successful, one of the most brave, and one of the most intense units that fought in World War I at any given point. They are considered to be very successful in their movements against the German lines, and they were an active combat unit during World War I. Their story is amazing, and I'm going to be linking down in the description an article from the Smithsonian Magazine if you want to learn more about them, but they are an absolutely amazingly cool group, and I love to talk about them, right? So, but there's a lot of information out there on them, and you should definitely go educate yourself on them as much as you can, but I will provide some of those educated resources down in the links below, okay? So now the big thing going forward, though, also, it takes time to mobilize, though, right? April 1st may be when we declared war, but our standing military was not that large at the time. So we could not actually just grab up the entire military and send them over there. It takes time to mobilize. American soldiers must be trained. They must be recruited. They must be checked medically. They must then also go through 9 weeks of basic training before they can even begin to be able to fight. So the Germans are very aware of this, and because the springtime is showing up, the Germans decide to act on a massive offensive, right? Using unrestricted submarine warfare at their back and a huge offensive using several different methods. In the spring of 1918, they try to head off the American involvement and they strike hard at France and British lines on the Western Front. Because now, as of the spring of 1918, Russia is completely uninvolved because the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk has been signed and Russia has declared their surrender and their uninvolvement now in the war under Lenin, right? And the Germans are going to strike hard at the French lines using a lot of new tactics that they are using. Very, like, new tanks, new weaponry, gas, the use of more poisonous gas is going to be deployed, and also this unit known as German stormtroopers that were actually created in World War I in 1916, but are going to become very, very effective by the later methods of the war, because stormtroopers are a little bit different, because stormtroopers are small units of soldiers that attack weak points in the lines and actually directly, infiltrate trenches to try and cause as much hysteria to weaken up other areas of the line to prepare for massive waves of invasion, right? Stormtroopers also, though, are going to come back again in the 1940s. However, the ones in World War I don't have political implications, whereas the stormtroopers from the 1940s do, because they are actually a unit of the Nazi military, right? We'll talk about that later on, and we will talk about how I do think it's important to bring up the stormtroopers of the early 1900s, because actually British and French and Americans are going to adopt the strategy as well due to its success. Now, this is going to also be very important because this whole offensive came within a very short distance of Paris, okay? So right there is Paris, okay? The city limits of Paris aren't until actually out here, the countryside area of Paris. This is how close the Germans got, within a few miles, right? And this was known as the Second Battle of the Marne, right? But the crazy thing that happens at the Second Battle of the Marne, the Germans didn't have quite enough steam. They got stalled out at the Second Battle of the Marne, even though they claimed this massive chunk of territory in their offensive. They got this close to winning that war, to winning World War I. But the arrival of 140,000 American troops at the Second Battle of the Marne, that were just the tip of the sword of the 2 million U.S. troops that are going to be coming into World War I as the war continues to progress, showed up at the Second Battle of the Marne, and the fronts are going to begin to be slowly pushed back into Austria and Germany. So this is actually as far as the German lines ever advanced, right? And so once this occurs, and once the Americans become hyper-involved and they begin to push these front lines back into Austria and Germany, the scene in these German cities is becoming very intense. So coupled with the fact that the spring offensive by the Germans is failing, there also are massive revolutionary movements happening in German cities. This right here is a barricade built out of newspaper that is being put up inside of a German city. And as you can see, we have members of the German military and German commoners fighting against German royal police officers and police forces inside of their own cities, demanding an end to the war, right? And this is mainly inspired by the hunger that is going on, the famine that's been caused in Germany, and they are demanding that the war come to an end, and they are demanding a surrender of the German people. So that is actually a very important thing, that Germans inside of Germany wanted this war to end because the morale had gotten that low. And even their military actually was refusing, units of their military were actually refusing to fight. This is an entire German naval corps, actually, and I think it's called the Khalil, I can never say it right, but they actually one day stood up and said that they refused to fight in this war anymore. So you had naval mutinies going on in Germany, so even the military was trying to refuse fighting. So what's going to end up happening is revolution is basically going to break out inside of Germany and Austria, in Germany and Austria-Hungary, right? In this process, when November finally rolls around, Kaiser Wilhelm is going to abdicate the throne and flee into the Netherlands. And the Weimar Republic will be founded during that time. Austria-Hungary is going to abolish their monarchy, and they are actually going to elect a president. And most of this happens on November 9th and 10th. And why this is so important is because these revolutions inside of Germany and Austria-Hungary caused the Central Powers to surrender on 11/11/1918, right? So, and there's actually a really intense way to remember it. It's actually on the 11th hour of the 11th month of the 11th day in 1918, World War I ended. And we celebrate this day every single year now. Actually, in America, in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and for quite some time, it was actually known as Armistice Day. It was the day that World War I ended. We now call it Veterans Day, right? And we actually celebrate our veterans on this day, and we honor them, the day that World War I ended, right? And this is all going to be caused by the failure of that German offensive, the involvement of the Americans, and also due to the revolutions and the hunger riots that were going on inside of Austria and Germany. And this right here is an actual image of the Daily Telegraph, which comes out of, I believe, London, and it says, "World War is over. Germany accepts the armistice terms. Hostilities cease on all fronts," right? The Kaiser, oh wait, there we go. Wait, so the Kaiser, there it is. The Kaiser, Crown Prince, and Hindenburg seek refuge in Holland. Hindenburg is the general of the German forces, the leader of the German forces. He has that giant blimp named after him that ends up doing this. Yeah, that's right. Not a really good time to actually have a blimp named after you when it blows up. Now look, the Treaty of Versailles, though, and the Paris Peace Accords are then going to ensue immediately after this, right? So within a couple of months, as of January in 1919, because the actual armistice is going to be declared in November of 1918, after a few months of actually kind of piecing things back together, what ends up happening is the Paris Peace Accords start. The Paris Peace Accords are a meeting of the heads of state of the Allies to try and figure out how they're going to bring peace and try to prevent a war like this from ever happening again, right? And the guy who ends up showing up and becoming a very, very active member of this meeting is a man by the name of the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, right? Woodrow Wilson believes that the only way to solve this is by creating a simple and peace-having document. And that document was going to be known as Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, right? So Woodrow Wilson's 14 points called for a lot of different things, right? For example, all French territories should be freed, and then the invaded portions should be restored. Look at this. A lot of them have also a lot of things to do with navigations of the seas, right? And going against unrestricted submarine warfare, right? Because look, absolute freedom of navigation upon the seas outside of territorial waters alike in peace and in war, except as the seas may be closed in whole or in part by international action or the enforcement of international covenants, right? So the idea is he's advocating for free trade across the seas, right? He's advocating for the reduction in armaments of everyone. He's advocating for the open diplomacy ideas. He's also advocating for the creation of this thing known as the League of Nations, which is basically going to be the first impetus or the first example of the United Nations, right? A peace-founding group where countries can come together and actually debate these different ideas and prevent war from breaking out. He also advocates in this document for national self-determination, which is the notion that people should be able to live free from outside interference and should be able to choose their own government with democratic elections. So basically, he's advocating for the breakup of these ethnic, gigantically non-ethnic, centered empires, right? He thinks that Austrians should be governing Austrians and Serbians should be governing Serbians and things like that. So breaking the empires up, right? And what this is going to lead to is the rise of the Big Three. So at the Paris Peace Accords, you see the rise up of the Big Three, headed by the three big heads of state, and that's the United States, Great Britain, and France, okay? The big three heads of state include David Lloyd George, George Clemenceau, who is the president of France, this is the prime minister of Britain, and Woodrow Wilson, right? And you can actually see them in this picture right here. Right here is Woodrow Wilson. That is George Clemenceau, who looks exactly like the Lorax, if you ask me. And then also right here is David Lloyd George, and this is President Orlando of Italy, right? So now the big thing that ends up occurring, though, is these three guys become the big three because they are the big allied powerhouses that actually will end up profiteering off of this war more so than anyone else. Wilson is going to become obsessed with the idea of peace and the League of Nations. However, Great Britain and France have one thing in mind: punish Germany. And when I say Great Britain and France, I really mostly mean France, right? France decides that Germans should be punished using a new document known as the Treaty of Versailles, right? And so they believe that a compromise needs to be found, right? And that compromise should include Clemenceau's demands. Clemenceau demands that Germany be completely demilitarized, right? Demilitarized is in the essence of their army should be reduced to a dramatically lower number. I believe it's either 50,000 or 500,000 troops. They should have no navy whatsoever or air corps, and their demilitarization should be very, very large. Also, that they have to be paying reparations for any damage that they caused in the war, whether it be to civilians or to the governments. And also, they want to create a buffer state between France and Germany known as the Rhineland, right? The Rhineland becomes very, very important, okay? Now, and it's around the Ardennes forest. So the agreement is not so much of an agreement, and the reason why I have compromise in quotes is because this is not much of a compromise. Basically, Clemenceau got everything he wanted, and Wilson got next to nothing, right? Creation of the League of Nations did happen, but according to the Allies, or at least Clemenceau anyway, Germany wasn't going to be allowed to be in that League of Nations, which is really screwed up, and this goes completely against what Wilson wanted. A military reduction and not disarmament, which also went against Wilson's 14 points. But the other parts that Wilson did end up getting was the fact that the no more empires in Europe, chopping things up and encouraging national self-determination. Reparations for Germany was also not what Wilson wanted, which is going to be an insanely huge amount. It's going to end up equaling $2.7 trillion, right? Germany had to pay, I'm not kidding, $2.7 trillion in reparations. And guess when they got done paying them off? Their last payment to the United States was written in November of 2011. 2011, it was almost 100 years until they paid off their debt from World War I. And then Germany ends up giving up all of its colonies, and they had to give all of those to the big three under the League of Nations, right? So all of their imperialized territory they had to give away, but Britain and France ended up gaining more imperialized territory, right? The Rhineland would be established, and the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire would be dismantled, right? Wilson was humiliated. Some people claim that they believe that his mental ability was faltering. I don't know if I believe that. I need to do more research on it. Now, this is what Europe looked like before World War I. This is what it's going to look like after. So as you can see, the Ottoman Empire used to spread to a very large area. The Ottomans will just be turned into Turkey, and they have to give up all of their Middle Eastern possessions. The Austria-Hungarian Empire that used to expand into the Balkans has now been created into just Austria and is now actually much smaller, and these areas are going to be given to their Balkan counterparts. Hungary actually becomes completely independent, and Yugoslavia actually is going to be established out of the countries Croatia, Bosnia, Albania. No, not Albania. Albania, I believe, stays independent. Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, current-day Montenegro, current-day Kosovo, and current-day Macedonia, right? So that is going to be the country of Yugoslavia, which actually does not dismantle itself until the 1990s, right? So the big thing that actually ends up also coming out of this is a big, big part of the Treaty of Versailles, called the War Guilt Clause, right? The War Guilt Clause is an article of the Treaty of Versailles that declares that Germany takes sole responsibility for the war and had to pay reparations equal to all civilian damages, right? So this is insane. And Wilson believed that this document would single-handedly just lead to another war. And he's not completely wrong. There were other treaties that were just as bad as the Treaty of Versailles. We'll watch a video when I actually talk about this. Like Brest-Litovsk is actually a really screwed up treaty as well. But we will discuss this tomorrow as well. The War Guilt Clause, though, is very aggressive, and it kind of demonizes the German people for starting World War I, when actually, ironically enough, German people and German citizens are the people that bring peace to Germany and to World War I faster than anybody else. Now, the big thing going forward also with this, you need to jot this down. The Americans, because of the Paris Peace Accords and because of the Treaty of Versailles, refused to ratify the Treaty of Versailles, and they also refused to join the League of Nations, okay? Because Woodrow Wilson said, this is not the league that I wanted, okay? This is not okay, and he refuses to join it, right? So moving forward, though, there's then one last thing we need to talk about, and that's where we started out this flip, in the Middle Eastern theater. And the Middle Eastern theater is going to have one of the most screwed up betrayals of all time, because the Allies encouraged the Arabs to revolt against the Ottoman Empire, right? To help them win this war under people like Sir Lawrence of Arabia and other people of the like. And they wanted to see the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, and the promise was that these Arab people would then receive national self-determined countries as well. But what ends up happening is Britain and France did not deliver on these promises, and they just imperialized all the new nations that the Ottomans gave up. Britain ends up immediately going over and taking over Iraq. France ends up taking over areas inside of the Middle East as well. And the British immediately declared this thing called the Balfour Declaration, which in 1917, the British declared that they gave support to a Jewish homeland being created out of the Palestinian state, which of course we're still feeling the reverberations of now. And also, at one point, the General Syrian Congress comes up where the Syrian people, in conjunction with the Iraqis, tried to declare themselves independent, and this is going to be crushed by European powers immediately when they were threatened with war and invasion until they relented, right? So, ironically enough, the Middle Eastern people that helped win World War I were immediately betrayed after it actually happened, right? So, that is where we stop. That is the end of World War I. You guys are awesome, absolute champions. And we're starting with World War II the next time I see you in class. Y'all have a fantastic day. I'll see you soon.